Hi, welcome to our channel where we share the most intriguing stories. When a retired military prosecutor trades the courtroom for a peaceful citrus grove, he thinks he's left battles behind. But when a ruthless HOA tries to steal his land using forged documents, fake votes, and full-blown fraud, he digs in. This isn't just a legal fight, it's war. When I retired from the military legal corps at 43, I didn't imagine my future would smell like sun-warmed citrus and dust. I traded dress blues for denim, gavels for pruning shears, and bought 20 acres of rolling hillside in Ventura County, California. Not just any patch of dirt either. This land was clean, clear of liens, HOA entanglements, or bureaucratic rot. A freehold, it had its own water rights, its own tax parcel, and most importantly, its own peace. I spent the first 6 months after escrow closed knee-deep in irrigation trenches, hammering in drip lines with a sunburned back, and the quiet pride of someone finally doing something for himself. My house was modest, 2 bedrooms, timber frame with a tin roof that pinged softly when the fog rolled in at night. I designed it myself, nothing fancy, but it sat on the slope like it had grown there. The grove took longer. Organic citrus farming doesn't tolerate shortcuts. I planted Valencia and navel oranges in staggered rows, kept the soil rich with compost, tea, and mulched religiously. The air in late spring was thick with the perfume of orange blossoms and wood smoke from my old smoker on the porch. The world didn't call much, and I didn't answer. The neighbors, those who could even see my place, mostly kept to themselves. A few nodded at the feed store or during town meetings about brush fire protocols. Rancho Vista Bluffs was the nearest development, maybe a half-mile away downhill, a gated cluster of beige and vinyl with a front guard shack and a monthly newsletter filled with petty HOA bylaws. I avoided it like I avoid raw kale. I knew from the title search that my land wasn't part of any homeowners association. That was one of the conditions of purchase, in big, bold, underlined letters. The previous owner, a cantankerous horse rancher named Elwood Slater, had made damn sure of that. According to county records, in the late 90s, Elwood had fought tooth and nail to get his acreage legally excluded from the HOA's Phase 3 annexation and won. Final judgment, Ventura County Superior Court. Slam dunk. Which is why I nearly choked on my coffee when, one dusty morning in April, I opened my mailbox and found an envelope bearing the polished letterhead of Rancho Vista Bluffs Homeowners Association. A glossy trifold inside demanded I pay past due HOA fees and non-compliance penalties totaling $8,900 for unauthorized agricultural development, non-permitted dwelling structure, and unauthorized use of shared infrastructure. Shared infrastructure? The only thing I shared with Rancho Vista was resentment. The letter was signed in an aggressively cursive hand. Karen Mercer, President, Rancho Vista Bluffs HOA. It warned that failure to comply within 14 days could result in legal action, property liens, and this really made me laugh, suspension of water access. My water came from a private well, dug 200 feet into the earth and powered by a solar-fed Grundfos pump. They could suspend all they wanted. Still, I wasn't laughing for long. As any former JAG knows, the one thing worse than a stupid threat is a persistent one. I didn't assume this was a joke. I assumed it was a probe, a test to see if I'd blink. So I responded, not with a phone call or an email. I had a certified letter drawn up and signed by a notary at the Ventura County Clerk's office. In the envelope, a copy of the final court order excluding my parcel from the HOA's domain, a map showing boundary lines, and a brief paragraph reminding Ms. Mercer that further attempts to enforce illegal jurisdiction could constitute harassment and tortious interference with business operations. I included my contact information for any legitimate questions. I also CC'd the Ventura County Recorder's Office and the Department of Real Estate, just to make things loud and public. That should have been the end of it. But over the next few days, odd things started happening. The irrigation guys, local boys from Santa Paula, told me they'd been stopped by someone in a green golf cart near the bottom of my driveway, asked who gave them permission to operate equipment on HOA property. When they laughed and said the landowner, she apparently took pictures of their plates and drove off. Then came the landscaping contractor. Same story. Woman with a clipboard standing near the gate, scowling and muttering about unauthorized grading. I checked the security camera footage that night. Sure enough, there she was, blonde bob, pink visor, white sunglasses, snapping photos like she was on safari. I asked around at the feed store. A few of the old-timers chuckled and told me, "Sounds like Karen's sniffing around again." One guy, Rob, a lemon grower who'd had his own spat with the Bluffs, warned me that they'd tried this trick on his cousin's place. They think if they act confident enough, they can bully you into paying fees you never owed in the first place. Still, I figured my response was on the record. The law was on my side. I'd documented everything. I went back to pruning trees and adjusting the pH of the soil. The world smelled like citrus and sweat again, and I figured that would be the last I heard of the HOA. I had no idea I was about to step into a legal meat grinder. The next letter arrived not in my mailbox, but taped to my front gate with bright red painter's tape, like some creepy ransom note. The paper flapped in the wind, a glossy tri-fold monstrosity with a watermark that tried very hard to look official. The font choice screamed corporate enthusiasm. The tone screamed HOA tyranny. Notice of outstanding balance. Final warning. Amount due. $8,900. Additional penalties, accruing daily. The deadline had magically shrunk from 2 weeks to 1. Inside, in bold, failure to remit payment will result in suspension of water privileges. I stood by the gate, one hand on the metal latch, staring at the ridiculous sentence. Water privileges, as if I siphoned water out of their ornamental fountains. My water came from 200 feet below ground, pulled up by a system I installed and paid for myself. If anything, I had water privileges over the entire hill. But then, at the bottom of the letter, I saw something worse than arrogance. Your property has been incorporated into Rancho Vista Bluffs HOA under the Extended Community Expansion Resolution, Section 8. Extended Community Expansion Resolution, Section 8. None of that existed when I bought this land. And nothing legally could redraw parcel boundaries without county hearings, public notices, and a whole parade of bureaucracy. I knew the law. I lived by it for 20 years, which made one thing obvious. They weren't confused. They were lying. I went back to the house, scanned the document, and emailed it to my then attorney, Jared Kincaid. Jared came recommended by a couple of local farmers. He was young, enthusiastic, and spoke in buzzwords like strategic compliance response. He reminded me of the sort of JAG interns I used to babysit. I typed a quick summary. They escalated. "We need to shut this down," Jared replied within minutes. "Let's not antagonize them. Sometimes it's best to cooperate." Cooperate with extortion. My instincts twitched. I called him. "Jared, my property is not part of their HOA. It has never been part of it. They can't just annex private land because they feel like it." "Well," he said, dragging the word out like taffy, "HOAs do sometimes expand boundaries to include adjacent parcels. That requires unanimous owner approval," I snapped, "and sometimes county-level hearings. And, oh yeah, reality." He cleared his throat. "Look, Randall, they probably just misinterpreted something. We don't want to seem hostile. If you show willingness to cooperate, they may reduce the fees." There it was. The first hairline crack. "Jared," I said, flat and cold, "my willingness is not on the table. Facts are." He tried to talk, but I hung up. I wasn't paying him to negotiate with a tumor. I spent the afternoon preparing a formal response. A notarized cease and desist packet, copies of the original exclusion order from 1998, and a demand that they retract the claim of jurisdiction. I mailed it certified with return receipt. 2 days later, Rancho Vista Bluffs escalated again. Not with mail. With presence. I was tightening irrigation valves when I heard a car crunch along my gravel road. A spotless white Lexus SUV stopped just outside the gate. A woman got out, late 40s, expensive athleisure, blonde hair cut into a bob sharp enough to open envelopes. She held a clipboard like it was a weapon. I already knew who she was. She walked up to the gate, didn't smile, didn't greet me, just launched straight in. "Are you Randall Mason?" "I am." "I'm Karen Mercer, president of the Rancho Vista Bluffs Homeowners Association." I waited. Silence is underrated. She gave a smile that suggested she practiced it nightly in the mirror. "I'm here to discuss your outstanding balance." "No, you're here to trespass," I corrected. "This is private land." She ignored that. "As of now, your property falls under HOA governance. All members must contribute dues. You are past due 11 months. "Impossible. I bought the land only a year ago. We applied the dues retroactively." That sentence punched the air straight out of me. Retroactively, as if time itself bowed to her, I locked eyes with her. My parcel is not part of your HOA. She gave a chirpy little shrug. It is now, after the territorial reorganization. What reorganization? An internal vote. She glanced at her clipboard. We approved the expansion unanimously. I raised one eyebrow. Did you vote for me, too? Karen blinked. First crack in her lacquer. Failure to pay will result in a lien on your property, she said, voice tightening, and suspension of water access. I took one step closer to the gate and leaned my arms on the metal bar. Karen, I have my own well. She blinked again. All water in this community is subject to HOA jurisdiction. No, I said softly. All water in your subdivision is. I'm not part of your subdivision. She lifted her chin. I could see a tiny pulse beating in her temple. You are now. She turned, heels clicking on gravel, got into her Lexus, and drove away. No goodbye. No courtesy. Just the confidence of someone used to absolute obedience. Back inside, I poured myself a glass of cold water from the tap, just because I could, and started scanning county documents again. I wanted to dismiss the whole thing as a pathetic overreach, but something gnawed at me. People like Karen don't stop. They escalate. At the bottom of the HOA's final warning, printed in cheerful italics, was a line I had missed earlier. Legal proceedings have already been initiated. I stared at that sentence for a long time. Some people stop when you show them proof. Others stop only when a judge tells them to. I was starting to realize which type Karen was. 3 weeks passed without a sound. No more letters. No golf carts. No Karen. I figured maybe the notarized cease and desist had done the trick. Or maybe the county records I sent them made it through a skull or two. I let myself believe, foolishly, that silence meant retreat. Then the envelope came, not taped to my gate, not slid into my mailbox. Hand-delivered, certified, from the Ventura County Superior Court. Inside, a summons. Rancho Vista Bluffs Homeowners Association vs. Randall J. Mason. The claim? Non-payment of dues. Unauthorized use of community resources, violation of community regulations, and, my personal favorite, detrimental agricultural activity inconsistent with neighborhood aesthetics. The total demand had ballooned from $8,000 to $15,000 plus court fees, late penalties, and adjustments pending further review. I stared at the document for a full minute before laughing. Then I laughed harder. I laughed so hard I had to sit down on my porch bench and slap my knee like an old prospector. HOA had sued me. I wasn't even in the damn HOA. When the laughter died, the old prosecutor in me came roaring back. I scanned the papers, looked over the complaint. It was polished. Too polished. Not the work of a desperate HOA president with a word template. Someone with legal experience had helped her draft this. That was the first crackle of dread. I called Jared. He picked up on the second ring, bright as ever. Randall, hey, got your email. Wild stuff. We should talk strategy. No wild, Jared. They sued me. Right. Look, I know it's frustrating, but litigation's messy. Judges don't like these kinds of neighborhood squabbles. Best path is resolution. What kind of resolution? I asked. A settlement. He sounded far too relaxed. They might drop the suit for, say, $15,000. Maybe even $12 if we act fast. I owe them nothing. He hesitated. Judges don't always care about black and white. If they think you benefited from shared infrastructure, I've got my own infrastructure. Yeah, but it's perception, optics. Look, let's not roll the dice on this. If you settle, they go away. You avoid a court date, bad press. I cut him off. How many other clients do you have in Rancho Vista Bluffs? He went quiet. Jared? A few. It's a small area. Were you ever retained by the HOA? Another silence. This one longer. I've done some consulting, he admitted. Not for this case. Just general guidance. A year ago, maybe. And you didn't think that was worth disclosing? It's not a conflict. It's not just a conflict, I snapped. It's a betrayal of representation. You're on the damn advisory board, aren't you? He stammered. That's just honorary. I hung up. Then I started digging. 15 minutes on the state bar site confirmed it. Jared Kincaid listed as an external legal consultant to Rancho Vista Bluffs HOA since 2022. I found meeting notes buried deep in the HOA's website, most of it gated, but one PDF had slipped past their admin. There it was. Special thanks to Jared Kincaid for legal input during the territorial resolution vote, the same resolution they were using to try to rope me in. He'd never disclosed any of it. That night, I filed a formal complaint with the California State Bar Association, citing conflict of interest, unethical representation, and possible collusion. I sent copies to the court, marked the initial retainer agreement for cancellation, and boxed up every email and document I'd exchanged with Jared. Then I started calling around. It took a few days, but I found someone real. A name whispered to me by a citrus co-op manager who'd had his own run-in with HOA politics 5 years prior. Leslie Chapman, former federal auditor, specialized in HOA abuse cases and land use fraud. She didn't advertise, didn't have a website. She picked up her own phone, asked sharp questions, and didn't waste breath on sympathy. "I don't take every case," she said. "But if they're trying to expand their authority through forged jurisdiction, that's not just illegal. That's organized real estate fraud." I emailed her everything. She called me back that night. "They're not just pushing boundaries, Randall. They're running a racket. And you're not the first they've targeted. You're just the first who's fought back." She agreed to take the case. Next morning, I drove into town and met her in the back office of a title and deed firm she rented space from. She looked like someone who hadn't smiled in 20 years and didn't regret it. Gray suit, no jewelry, a coffee mug that read, "Sue me harder." By noon, we'd filed a motion to dismiss based on lack of jurisdiction and misrepresentation of legal authority. Leslie began submitting formal public records requests to the county. She wanted everything: parcel boundaries, water rights, annexation votes, grant applications. "Let's see what they've been hiding under the hood," she said, "because I guarantee you this isn't about dues. It's about power and probably money." I believed her. The fight wasn't just legal anymore, it was personal, and Karen Mercer had just made the worst mistake of her suburban empire-building life. Leslie didn't waste time. Within 48 hours, she'd already identified 3 red flags in the HOA's filings, and by the end of the week, she found something that made my skin crawl. It started with a simple question: "Have you ever applied for any agricultural grants or subsidies tied to this parcel?" I shook my head. "Never. I keep it lean. No federal money. No state strings. Just fruit and sweat." She turned her laptop toward me. On the screen was a scanned application filed 6 months earlier from Rancho Vista Bluffs HOA for a California Environmental Incentive Grant. The applicant: Rancho Vista Organic Cooperative, listing my parcel as the anchor project. I blinked. They had submitted a grant using my land as part of their HOA farming initiative. There were photos of my grove, my house, even a close-up of my solar irrigation controller lifted straight off my business Facebook page. They included a testimonial from a community farmer, RM, describing our collective vision for sustainable suburban agriculture. I stared at the screen. "They forged a quote from me?" I asked. "They forged your entire existence," Leslie muttered. According to public records, the HOA had received $120,000 from the California Green Growth Initiative. They claimed the HOA had transitioned into a hybrid agricultural residential community and that the citrus operation, my citrus operation, was a cornerstone of the Rancho Vista Organic Sustainability Program. "I'm not even in their damn HOA," I yelled. Leslie smirked. "That's the part that makes this criminal." She filed formal complaints with the California Department of Conservation and the Office of Grant Oversight. At the same time, she submitted subpoenas for HOA financials, meeting minutes, and internal correspondence. Karen's name appeared on nearly every relevant document. But what was even better? A footnote referencing a strategic advisory from a legal consultant, J. Kincaid. That smug bastard had helped them write the grant application. My former attorney had facilitated the fraud. We weren't just dealing with petty extortion anymore. This was grant fraud using forged community identity. A different beast entirely. Leslie turned to me. "We go public," she said. I hesitated. I'd never been a fan of media, but she was right. Court filings moved slow. The HOA was getting money, prestige, maybe even expanding their influence off the back of my trees. So I contacted a friend from my Army days who now worked at a local paper, the Ventura Valley Chronicle. He owed me for keeping his name out of an Article 15 hearing back in Okinawa. The story dropped 2 days later. Farmer or fraud? HOA accused of using non-member land to secure green grants, front page, above the fold. The article included drone shots of my orchard, quotes from my cease and desist letter, and a breakdown of the fraudulent grant claims. It even called out Karen Mercer by name. The reaction was nuclear. Local farmers started calling me, asking if their names had been used too. Environmental groups issued cautious statements about concerns over grant application integrity. The state's agriculture department said they were reviewing the disbursement. Meanwhile, Karen released a statement to the HOA community claiming it was all a clerical error and that I was maliciously misrepresenting community efforts. She underestimated how quickly farmers smell bullshit. Leslie was 10 steps ahead. She coordinated with a whistleblower from inside the county records office who flagged inconsistencies in HOA annexation filings, missing dates, mismatched signatures, and in at least one instance, documents signed on behalf of people who had never owned property in the subdivision. It was unraveling fast. The best part, we had leverage. Fraudulent grant applications tied to falsified jurisdiction and forged identity aren't just civil issues, they're federal crimes, especially when state funds are involved. We filed an amendment to our counterclaim, attaching the grant documentation and requesting an immediate freeze on the HOA's financial accounts pending investigation. We also asked for an emergency injunction preventing them from representing my land in any further filings, promotions, or internal communications. The judge scheduled a hearing. The HOA scrambled. That night, someone slashed my irrigation line. They cut it clean, surgical, right where the pipe connected to the controller unit. They didn't steal anything. They didn't spray graffiti. It wasn't vandalism. It was a warning. I spent the next morning replacing pipe, glancing over my shoulder at every creak of the wind. And when I was done, I did something I hadn't done since I left the Army. I bought trail cams, 4 of them, mounted in the trees. Motion triggered, infrared, night vision, 2 aimed at the main drive, 1 toward the grove, and 1 overlooking the tool shed. I wasn't going to be intimidated off my own damn land. Karen and her HOA had just moved from bureaucracy to sabotage, and I was done playing defense. It started with a whisper, then became a wave. First, a post on a local Facebook group. Does anyone know what's going on at the Orange Grove on Ridgeback Hill? The smell is unbearable lately. My kid keeps coughing. Then another. Saw some suspicious trucks and barrels up there. Are they spraying something illegal? And another. I heard he's not even zoned for agriculture. Bet the runoff is poisoning the groundwater. All anonymous. All full of shit. And all in the same voice. Smug concern hiding under faux community anxiety. It didn't take a genius to see what was happening. Karen Mercer and her HOA cronies had declared war not in court this time, but in the court of public opinion. And they were using the internet as their weapon of choice. Within a week, the story had legs. Local next-door threads were filled with breathless posts from supposed concerned neighbors about the toxic farm on the hill. Photos started circulating, blurry, grainy shots of my orchard at night, framed to look ominous. One showed me hauling compost with a caption, "Unlicensed chemical dumping?" Another was a still from security footage with the words "illegal water use" scrawled across it in Comic Sans like a damn meme from 2008. They were trying to paint me as some kind of environmental outlaw, a backyard Monsanto in work boots. One post even suggested I was laundering water for cartel grows. That one made me laugh out loud for about 2 seconds. Then I saw it reposted by a county supervisor's staff account. Leslie wasn't laughing. "They're testing public perception," she said, "trying to pre-poison the jury pool, shift the narrative. If you look like a criminal, then everything you do, even defending your land, starts to seem suspicious." It was an old tactic, weaponized gossip. We'd seen it in military courts too. Break the man before you challenge the facts. So I hit record. I took my phone out into the grove and filmed a 5-minute video. I stood under my oldest navel tree, sunlight through the leaves, birdsong in the distance, and laid it all out. The false HOA claims, the lawsuit, the forged grant, the vandalism, the smear campaign. I kept it clean, sharp, factual, like a legal deposition with dirt under its fingernails. Then I posted it everywhere: Facebook, Reddit, Twitter, even TikTok, though I had no idea how the damn app worked. Title: HOA is trying to steal my farm. Here's the truth. It blew up faster than I expected. The comments were overwhelmingly in my favor. Farmers, veterans, anti-HOA crusaders, even environmental activists, all furious. People offered to volunteer legal help, donate to a defense fund. I declined, and even drive out to Ventura to guard the Grove. It got picked up by a mid-sized YouTube channel that specialized in exposing HOA abuse. By the end of the week, the video had 300,000 views. That was when the local news came knocking. First, it was Channel 4, the one that always opened with a graphic of a spinning orange. Then Channel 11. Then a podcast called No Subdivision Nation. They all wanted interviews, footage, tours. I gave them everything. They filmed my well, my irrigation system, my barn. I let them look at the permit plaques, the zoning records, the court filings. They got a shot of me holding a legal folder in one hand and an orange in the other. The segment aired on a Tuesday night. Farmer versus HOA. Citrus Grove. Owner fights back against accusations. Smear campaign. Karen must have seen it because that same night, a new wave of posts hit social media. Saw armed guards at the farm today. Who is this guy? And why does he need cameras? His trees are probably illegal anyway. Who grows citrus here without permits? I bet his water's stolen from the community. That HOA should sue him harder. It didn't stop at words this time. 2 days later, I woke up to find a pile of trash dumped on my driveway. Construction waste, sheetrock, paint cans, torn up insulation. It stank of mold and piss. And on top of it, someone had scrawled in red spray paint, "Go back to the city" jokes on them. I never lived in a city. I installed another 2 trail cams pointed at the road. I filed a police report not because I expected results. The sheriff's office in this county is chronically underfunded, but to establish a paper trail. Leslie added the incident to our harassment timeline. "This is good," she said. "Good?" I asked. "Yeah, because now we're not just talking about fraud. We're talking about sustained defamation, coordinated harassment, and intentional interference with business operations. That's triple damages if we win." They thought they were scaring me into silence, but they'd forgotten one thing. I wasn't trying to disappear. I was getting louder, and for the first time in my life, I was grateful for the internet. We thought the worst was behind us. The fraud, the smear campaign, the vandalism. But Karen Mercer wasn't done. She still believed she could win, not by proving facts, but by rewriting history. It started with a filing. Leslie and I were preparing for the upcoming evidentiary hearing when she got a copy of the HOA's latest court submission. She printed it without comment and slid it across my table. "Take a look at Exhibit D." I flipped through the stapled pages and froze. There it was, a scanned document dated January 2nd, 2012, titled Power of Attorney and HOA Membership Consent, signed supposedly by Elwood Slater, the previous owner of my land. The paper claimed that Slater had agreed to join Rancho Vista Bluffs HOA shortly before his death, that he had voluntarily submitted the parcel into HOA jurisdiction under a unified community inclusion agreement. The signature looked passable. There was even a notary seal from Nevada. I set the pages down slowly. He died in 2011. Leslie nodded once. August. They're using a document signed by a dead man to prove jurisdiction over my land. They are. It was more than just brazen. It was criminal. I called Elwood's daughter Sandra, who I'd met once during the sale. She lived in Oregon now, taught high school biology. She answered on the second ring, her voice instantly tense when I explained the situation. "That's not possible," she said. My father hated the HOA. He called them the lawn Nazis. He sued them in the 90s. He had that exclusion order framed in his hallway. I asked if she had any records of her own. She did. She overnighted a folder filled with handwritten letters from Elwood, receipts, land records, and best of all, a statement in his will that reaffirmed the land was never to be part of any suburban entity, HOA or otherwise. He'd even filed a letter with the county to that effect 6 months before he passed. Leslie arranged for an independent forensic document examiner to review the HOA's power of attorney. The verdict came back in 3 days. Forgery. The signature was mechanically reproduced, likely from an old check or property document. The notary seal belonged to a Nevada notary whose license was revoked in 2015 for fraudulent filings, but Karen had already submitted it under penalty of perjury. We took it straight to the judge. Leslie filed a motion for evidentiary sanctions, citing willful and intentional use of fabricated legal instruments to influence court jurisdiction. It was legal napalm. Karen responded with a statement saying it was an archival document received from the Slater estate and that she could not verify its origin at the time of filing. A transparent deflection. She was trying to blame the ghost of Elwood for her own forgery. The judge didn't buy it. At the next hearing, he looked over his glasses at the HOA's lawyer, not Jared, who had since gone suspiciously quiet, but some fresh-faced replacement from a small firm in Thousand Oaks. Your client has presented this court with a forged legal document, the judge said, either knowingly or with reckless disregard. Do you understand the gravity of that? The lawyer stammered something about clerical errors. The judge set the folder down slowly. We are no longer discussing a civil dispute, he said. We are now entering the realm of criminal misconduct. That single sentence sent a chill through the room. Karen, seated stiffly behind her lawyer, didn't flinch, but her jaw clenched so tight I thought she might snap a crown. Leslie leaned toward me and whispered, "We just turned the tide." But Karen, being Karen, didn't back down. She doubled down. That week, HOA board members began circulating a new letter to the Rancho Vista community, accusing me of falsifying the will of Elwood Slater to evade civic obligations. She claimed I had pressured his daughter, manipulated legal documents, and waged a psychological campaign against Rancho Vista Bluffs. They included this letter in HOA newsletters, slipped it into mailboxes, and posted it, of course, to next door. Leslie saw it, printed it, and chuckled. Defamation. That's number 5 on our list now. But the deeper we dug, the more we found. The HOA hadn't just fabricated one document. They had backdated an entire paper trail. Meeting notes, community vote logs, land use proposals, all referencing Project Unity, a supposed 2012 initiative to expand HOA boundaries, except not one of those meetings appeared in county records. And the people they listed as attending? 2 had moved away before that date. 1 was dead. This wasn't a misunderstanding, Leslie said. It's an engineered land grab, carefully layered over time. Who the hell plans this kind of thing? I asked. People who've gotten away with it before, she said. But not this time. With the forgery confirmed, the fraud unraveling, and the social pressure turning into a boomerang, we updated our countersuit again, this time adding criminal referral recommendations. Leslie also submitted formal requests to the District Attorney's Office and California Department of Real Estate. I drove out to Elwood's old favorite spot, a shady bend near the ridgeline where the citrus rows meet the wild oaks. I stood there a while, watching the sunset light filter through branches, thinking about the absurdity of it all. They had forged the signature of a man who literally died to keep this land free from HOA control. Karen thought she could rewrite the past. But the dead don't lie. And paper trails don't forget. After the forged power of attorney was exposed, we thought maybe, just maybe, Karen Mercer would blink. That she'd feel the heat closing in, realize the con was collapsing, and throw up her manicured hands in surrender. She didn't. She went nuclear instead. It started with a letter. Another one. Always with the letters. But this time, it wasn't from the HOA. It was from the Department of Water Resources. The letter stated that my irrigation system, the very one I installed, permitted, and inspected twice, had triggered a compliance audit based on community complaints of overuse and unauthorized diversion. I reread the header 3 times. Someone had reported my well as if I were piping water out of a public reservoir. Worse, the file included a complaint summary citing possible aquifer depletion threatening nearby residential supply. I don't have neighbors for a quarter mile. The only ones downhill, Rancho Vista Bluffs. Karen was now weaponizing state bureaucracy. Leslie snapped into action. She filed a FOIA request to obtain the full complaint records. While we waited, she made some calls. Turns out, the field officer scheduled to inspect my land had previously worked on a project funded by the same environmental grant that Rancho Vista had received. The same fraudulent grant tied to my land. The game was rigged, so I invited the inspector anyway. Let him come. Let him walk the grove, measure the water pressure, count the drip heads. I offered coffee. I smiled. I showed permits. I was gracious. But I also made damn sure 2 reporters were there, filming every second of it. By the time he left, visibly annoyed, Leslie had already drafted a letter of protest to the agency's director, CEC'd the county agricultural commissioner, and posted the footage to the Chronicle's YouTube page under the title, "Inspect This. How a fake HOA weaponized state agencies against a farmer." It racked up 40,000 views in 3 days. Karen's next move came faster than we expected. She filed an emergency motion in court claiming that I had harassed HOA members, obstructed roadways, and created an unsafe living environment for the Rancho Vista community. She attached a petition signed by several residents, nearly all of whom I'd never met, calling for immediate restriction of access to shared roadways and community protection. Her goal was clear: to block my access to the shared easement road that connected my land to the county highway. Problem was, my access wasn't a privilege. It was a recorded prescriptive easement granted decades ago, long before Rancho Vista Bluffs ever existed. Still, her motion forced us to respond. We showed up in court with decades of records, photos, historical maps, even a testimony from the county surveyor. Karen's people tried to argue that the road had changed character due to community development and was now incompatible with commercial agriculture traffic. I stood up in front of the judge and said, "Your Honor, the road didn't change. The HOA just started acting like it owned gravity." The gallery laughed. The judge didn't, but he ruled in our favor. Denied. Still, something about that hearing felt different. Karen was no longer calm, no longer smug. She whispered furiously to her new lawyer and at one point refused to stand when addressed by the judge. Her composure, her armor, was cracking. Then came the turning point. Leslie received a call from a contact at the state controller's office. Apparently, during a routine audit of community grant distributions, Rancho Vista's agricultural initiative triggered multiple red flags, namely matching funds that didn't exist and labor logs signed by non-existent people. Someone inside the controller's office had passed along a tip, anonymous but detailed. According to this source, Rancho Vista had been fabricating payroll records, listing ghost employees for the Sustainable Citrus Cooperative. A dozen names, fake timesheets, all tied to one account. We subpoenaed the HOA's financials, fought tooth and nail for them. When we finally got access, the whole thing blew wide open. The HOA had used my orchard as the physical justification for tens of thousands in fake labor claims. They listed picking teams, seasonal irrigation crews, even volunteer coordination staff, all funded through the environmental grant, all fake. The money had flowed from the grant to the HOA account, then straight to a private LLC controlled by Karen Mercer's cousin in Orange County. That LLC registered 2 weeks before the grant was awarded. This was organized fraud. Clean, intentional, surgical, and now we had it on paper. Leslie updated our complaint to include racketeering, grant embezzlement, and conspiracy to defraud the state. She submitted the documents to the district attorney, the state controller, and, at my request, the FBI tip line. I didn't care who picked up the case first. I just wanted someone to knock. And knock they did. 2 weeks later, while I was on the south end of the Grove checking for root rot, I saw the first unmarked sedan pull into Rancho Vista Bluffs. Then another. Then 3 federal agents. Within an hour, HOA board members were being escorted out of the community center. Karen wasn't among them. I heard she wasn't home. Out at the spa, someone said. I smiled, let her relax while she still could. They got her 2 days later. Karen Mercer was arrested in the parking lot of a luxury spa in Ojai, still wearing a robe, clutching a green juice in one hand and her phone in the other, frantically yelling something about attorney privilege and unlawful detainment. But there was nothing privileged about it. The charges read like a Wall Street indictment: fraud, conspiracy, misuse of public funds, forgery, falsification of legal documents, racketeering, and obstruction of justice. She was perp-walked past a row of cameras in fuzzy slippers. Poetic. Jared Kincaid didn't fare much better. Turns out the forensic sweep of HOA emails linked his office directly to the creation of fake labor logs and the forged power of attorney. His name was on invoices for compliance consulting tied to non-existent employees. He tried to play dumb, claim the documents were prepared by a junior associate, but the bank transfers told a different story. He was arrested outside his office in Oxnard, caught mid-latte. Leslie called me with the news. Her voice was flat, controlled, but I could tell she was pleased. "It's over," she said. But it wasn't. Not quite. The judge still had to issue a ruling in our counterclaim, the class action we'd filed on behalf of myself and 3 other property owners who'd been dragged into the HOA's land grab. The hearing was scheduled for a Monday morning. By then, the media circus had grown. The courtroom was packed. Journalists, legal observers, HOA survivors from all over the state. Even a retired state senator known for his anti-HOA reform stance showed up, wearing a bolo tie and a look of grim satisfaction. Karen didn't appear. She was still in county jail. Her new attorney, the third in 6 weeks, arrived looking like a man trying to outrun a hurricane. The judge reviewed the evidence carefully, slowly. His tone remained measured. But when he reached the forged grant applications, the fraudulent payroll, and the use of a dead man's signature to claim jurisdiction, his voice hardened. "I find that Rancho Vista Bluffs HOA," he said, "has systematically abused legal process, misrepresented jurisdictional boundaries, and engaged in coordinated fraudulent activity to expand its authority and enrich its board members." Then he turned to the room, almost as if addressing an audience. "This is not a civil misstep. This is a criminal operation disguised as community governance." He ordered the immediate dissolution of Rancho Vista Bluffs HOA. All of its financial accounts were to be frozen. All properties fraudulently annexed were to be removed from its records. The HOA's assets, clubhouse, reserve funds, land titles were to be sold to repay victims. And then he turned to me. "Mr. Mason," he said, "for the sustained legal harassment, reputational damage, destruction of business operation, and emotional distress caused by this fraudulent organization, this court awards you damages in the amount of $250,000 plus costs." He looked down at the paperwork and added, "And in a personal capacity, I'd like to thank you for not rolling over." Outside the courtroom, the press descended. Microphones, flashbulbs, questions. All I said was, "I just wanted to grow oranges." That line made the evening news. 3 months later, Karen Mercer was sentenced to 11 years in prison, 7 for fraud and conspiracy. 4 more added after the judge saw she'd tried to transfer HOA funds into a shell company while out on bail. She cried in court, of course, blamed everyone but herself, claimed she was just trying to protect community standards. The jury didn't buy it. Neither did the judge. Jared got 7 years plus permanent disbarment. His firm collapsed within days of his conviction. The fallout was massive. A statewide task force was formed to investigate HOA corruption. Several county officials quietly resigned. The state announced a moratorium on all HOA territorial expansions pending review. California Property Law Review ran a cover story titled "The Citrus Rebellion: How One Farmer Toppled an HOA Empire." As for me, I used some of the settlement money to upgrade my irrigation system and hire a couple of part-timers to help with the orchard. The rest I donated to a legal aid group that helps homeowners fight predatory HOAs. They named the fund after me, which felt weird at first, but I got used to it. On a breezy Friday afternoon in early fall, I put up a new sign at the end of my drive, just a small wood post, laser-etched, clear finish, private farm, no HOA, no scammers. Trespassers will be exposed. A week later, I got a package in the mail from Sandra Slater, Elwood's daughter. Inside was a photo of her father standing beside the same citrus trees back when they were half their current height. He had a hand on one of them, smiling like a man who knew what mattered. There was a note taped to the back. "Thanks for finishing what he started. Sometimes the land fights back. Sometimes it just needs someone willing to dig in and hold the line."